Emma adjusted the rearview mirror for the 10th time in as many minutes, the reflection catching the soft glow of her dashboard lights and Leela's excited grin beside her. The road stretched out like a ribbon through the dense pine forest, and although the trees pressed in from either side, Emma felt a rare sense of freedom. Leela had insisted on this trip, a weekend getaway in a secluded cabin to celebrate their graduation. "You're nervous, admit it," Leela teased, tossing a duffel bag onto the passenger seat. "It's just a couple of nights in the woods, not like the cabin's haunted or anything." Emma forced a laugh, gripping the wheel a little tighter. Yeah, just, me, always overthinking." The car dipped into a shallow valley, headlights illuminating the narrow road ahead. Something flickered in the shadows between the trees. A figure? No, just the way the branches swayed. Emma shook her head and exhaled. She was tired from finals, from packing, from overanalyzing every detail of life. Maybe Leela was right. Maybe she just needed this trip. By the time they arrived, dusk was settling into night. The cabin was small, rustic, and isolated, perched at the edge of a clearing with the forest closing in all around. Its wooden walls were dark and weathered, and a loose shutter rattled softly in the wind. Emma shivered, more from unease than from the cold, but Leela clapped her hands, eager to explore. "This is perfect. Look at that view," Leela said, rushing to the porch railing, her hair catching the last amber light of sunset. Emma followed reluctantly, trying to shake off the creeping anxiety. They unpacked quickly, setting their bags near the small fireplace and arranging snacks on the worn wooden table. Emma glanced at the windows. Shadowy trees loomed just beyond the glass, and the wind seemed to whisper through the forest. She told herself it was just her imagination. Night fell, and the two friends settled in. Leela insisted on making hot chocolate, while Emma curled up on the couch with a blanket. They laughed about old college memories, teasing each other and sharing stories that had nothing to do with the stress of exams or their uncertain futures. For a few golden hours, everything was ordinary. But the forest outside the cabin seemed to grow darker, almost oppressive, as if the trees themselves were leaning closer, eavesdropping. Emma felt it, a prickling sensation at the back of her neck, the type she had dismissed so many times before. It's just the woods, just the wind. Then came the first sound, a faint crack, like a branch breaking underfoot, so soft that Leela didn't notice, but Emma froze, staring into the blackness beyond the window. Her pulse quickened. "Emma, you okay?" Leela asked, still focused on stirring the chocolate. "Yeah, I thought I heard something," Emma said, her voice tighter than she intended. Leela rolled her eyes, laughing it off. They moved to the bedrooms, locking doors and checking windows. Emma felt slightly better, but the sense of being watched lingered like a shadow in her mind. They brushed it off as nerves. It wasn't until later, long after they had laughed themselves into exhaustion, that the sound came again, louder this time, the front door gently rattling. Emma froze. The soft metallic click of a lock being manipulated reached her ears, and suddenly the cozy cabin felt like a trap. "Leela, someone's here," Emma whispered, trying to keep calm. Before Leela could respond, the door burst open with a violent force. A tall figure loomed in the doorway, masked and silent. Emma screamed, stumbling backward, her blanket tangling around her legs. Leela bolted toward the window, but the intruder moved with terrifying speed, cutting her off. Emma's hands flew to her face as the intruder lunged. Panic made her fingers fumble, heart hammering against her ribs. She felt a sudden impact, and everything blurred into a chaotic rush of movement, screams, shouts, thuds, and the metallic clang of something striking the floor. "Lila!" Emma shouted, and that scream, her friend's voice, was the last thing Emma registered before the world went black. Hours or maybe minutes later, Emma awoke to pain and confusion. Her head throbbed, body ached. The room was silent except for the soft whine of the wind outside and the distant, irregular blinking of police lights through the windows. Her eyes adjusted, and then she saw them. Officers moving through the cabin, radios crackling, their faces grim. And then Leela. She wasn't moving, not a twitch, not a breath. "No, no, no," Emma whispered, crawling toward her friend, tears blurring her vision. The officer gently restrained her. "Ma'am, she didn't make it. I'm so sorry." The world tilted. Emma wanted to scream, to fight, to rip the walls down and undo the night, but the grief hit like a tidal wave. Her best friend, her laughter, her warmth, gone in an instant. As the officer spoke, asking questions Emma could barely comprehend, her gaze drifted to the shadows outside the cabin. The intruder was gone, vanished as suddenly as he had appeared. Only one piece of evidence remained, a torn scrap of fabric snagged at the doorframe, fluttering like a grim flag in the night. Then her phone vibrated, a message notification. "Next time, it won't just be one of you." Emma's fingers trembled as she read it. A cold dread settled deep into her bones. The attack had a purpose. Leela hadn't been random, and now Emma knew she was next. The police tried to reassure her, but she felt the weight of isolation pressing down. The cabin, once a place of laughter and freedom, had become a cage, and somewhere out there, in the dark, a predator was waiting. That night, as she lay awake in a borrowed hospital bed, Emma stared at the ceiling, mind racing. Every sound, a creak, a whisper, the hum of the fluorescent lights, felt like a threat. Guilt gnawed at Emma, each heartbeat a reminder that she had lived while Leela hadn't. And deep down, Emma understood. Surviving was only the beginning. The hospital room smelled faintly of antiseptic and fear. Emma lay in the bed, propped up against a mound of pillows, staring blankly at the ceiling. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly above, but they did nothing to ease the turmoil inside her. Every sound, the distant wail of an ambulance, the shuffle of nurses' shoes, felt magnified, each one a potential signal that someone was watching, waiting. The police had come and gone hours ago. They had taken statements, asked countless questions, and left her with a note promising protection. But Emma couldn't shake the sensation that the attacker hadn't vanished. He was still out there, patient, silent, biding his time. Her fingers traced the edges of the phone in her lap. The message was burned into her mind. "Next time, it won't be just one of you." Her chest tightened. She had lived through horror, but surviving meant something more now. She couldn't just hide. She had to understand. A soft knock at the door startled her. Emma looked up to see Detective Reynolds entering, his face a blend of professionalism and unease. He held a small notebook in one hand. "Emma, I need you to try and recall everything you remember from that night. Anything, no matter how small, could help us catch him." Emma swallowed, throat tight. I remember Leela screaming, and there was someone there. Tall, masked. I don't know. I didn't see his face. I tried to stop him, but..." Her voice broke. Reynolds nodded, encouraging her. "Take your time. Even fragments help. Did you notice anything unusual? Anything about the way he moved, what he carried, or even the sounds he made?" Emma closed her eyes, forcing the images back into focus. The figure had moved with precision, almost mechanical. The way he handled the lock, how he circled the room. It wasn't random. She remembered the faint scent of cologne, sharp and woody, and the fabric of his gloves, smooth and dark. A shiver ran through her. Gloves, dark gloves, and he had this rhythm, like he knew exactly what he was doing. Reynolds jotted it down, eyes narrowing. Good, that might help. We're going to check everything, the cabin, the surrounding area, even neighbors for anything unusual. You're not alone, Emma. We'll find him. But Emma wasn't convinced. The sensation of being watched followed her everywhere. Back in her apartment, every shadow seemed alive. Her front door lock clicked, her windows rattled with even the faintest breeze, and sometimes, just when she felt safe, her phone would vibrate with a call. Nobody on the other end, only silence. Days turned into a tense rhythm of therapy sessions, police interviews, and sleepless nights. Emma struggled with survivor's guilt. She replayed the night endlessly in her mind, imagining how she could have saved Leela, how she could have fought harder, screamed louder. She hated the helplessness that clung to her. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the city skyline, Emma decided to confront the fear rather than hide. She returned to the police station with a list of observations she had scribbled in a notebook. Tiny details about the cabin, the strange noises, the small oddities she had barely registered at the time. Detective Reynolds leaned over the desk, scanning her notes. These are good, Emma. The fabric scrap, the broken lock mechanism, even the tire tracks near the cabin, they all point to someone experienced, possibly military, or at least someone who knows how to plan a break-in meticulously. Emma's stomach churned. But why Leela? Why me? Reynolds exchanged a glance with another officer. We're looking into your social circle, college acquaintances, friends, anyone who might have had a grudge or an unhealthy obsession. Emma's heart sank. Someone familiar? Could someone they know harbor that kind of hatred? The thought was terrifying. Returning home, Emma noticed something unusual. A small, dark car parked across the street. Its engine was off. No lights, just a shadow against the night. Her pulse quickened. She ducked behind her curtain, peering cautiously. The car didn't move, but neither did the figure inside. Panic surged. She wanted to flee, call the police, but her hands trembled too violently to grab her phone. The next day, she received a package at her apartment. No return address. Inside, a single item. Leela's bracelet, the one she always wore on her right wrist. Her hand shook as she held it, tears welling up. Her mind screamed, how could the attacker have this? How could he have survived all this time, knowing she was still alive? She reported it to Reynolds immediately. It's him, she whispered. He's still out there, watching me. Reynolds frowned. We'll increase patrols around your home. I promise we're not letting him slip away again. Emma nodded, but inside she felt a spark of determination. Waiting for the police wasn't enough. She needed to understand, to anticipate, to prepare. She began reviewing photos from the trip, studying every frame for shadows, unusual figures, or any detail she might have missed. Every sound outside her apartment, every flicker of light became a part of a pattern she was determined to decipher. Late one night, she returned to the notebook where she had started piecing together minor inconsistencies from the attack. A footstep here that didn't match Leela's, a creak in the floor that didn't align with the cabin's structure, even the position of furniture slightly altered. Small, almost invisible, but deliberate. And then she found it. A mark in the diary she had kept during college, a journal entry Leela had written months before the attack. It mentioned a classmate who had always been too close, too watchful. Her heart pounded as the realization hit. This wasn't random. This was personal. From that moment, a new resolve formed. The fear was still there, constant, gnawing, but alongside it grew a dangerous clarity. The attacker had underestimated her. He hadn't killed her, but she would not be a passive target. She would find him first, or at least she would find the truth. And as she lay awake that night, listening to the faint rustle of wind outside, Emma knew one thing with terrifying certainty. The predator was out there, closer than she could imagine, and he would not stop until he had finished what he started. But Emma was no longer the same girl who had arrived at the cabin. The terror had awakened a strength, sharp and relentless, and somewhere in the darkness she was already preparing for the day she would face him. Emma sat at her kitchen table, a single lamp casting long shadows across the room. The bracelet she had found, the last tangible connection to Leela, rested beside her notebook, a silent reminder of the night that had shattered everything. Her hands shook slightly as she traced her finger over the familiar charm, but her mind was sharp, focused. The fear that had once paralyzed her was now tempered by determination. She couldn't just survive anymore. She had to uncover the truth. For weeks, she had meticulously pieced together what little evidence the police had found and her own recollections from the night of the attack. Small details, once dismissed in the haze of trauma, now took on new meaning. The broken lock, the tire tracks outside the cabin, the faint scent of cologne. It wasn't just an intruder, it was someone with planning, someone who had studied their routines. Her breakthrough came unexpectedly. While reviewing old photos of her and Leela at college, Emma noticed something strange. In a candid shot of Leela laughing outside the library, a shadowy figure lurked in the background, barely visible, but unmistakable. The face was partially obscured, but the stance, the posture, it was deliberate. Someone had been watching them for months. Emma's pulse quickened. She cross-referenced the figure with the name mentioned in Leela's old journal, a former classmate, Derek Mallory, known for his obsessive tendencies and unpredictable behavior. Derek had been friendly enough on the surface, but had a history of becoming dangerously fixated on people he admired or envied. He had always been unusually close to Leela, attending her events, showing up uninvited, sending gifts that bordered on intrusive. Emma hadn't thought much of it at the time. Now it all fit. She brought her findings to Detective Reynolds, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. I think it's him, Derek Mallory. He's obsessed with Leela. He's dangerous. Reynolds frowned, flipping through Emma's photos and notes. We've interviewed him in the past. No criminal record, nothing to tie him directly to the attack. But your instincts are strong, Emma. We'll bring him in for questioning. In the meantime, stay vigilant. He may be closer than you think. Vigilant was putting it mildly. That night, as Emma returned to her apartment, she felt eyes on her. Shadows moved outside her windows. A faint scrape on the balcony railing made her heart leap. She checked her phone, no messages, no calls, but the feeling of being watched intensified. Determined, Emma decided she couldn't wait for Derek to make the next move. She revisited the cabin where the attack had occurred, her breath visible in the cold night air. The forest was eerily quiet, the moon casting thin silver light over the clearing. She traced the route they had taken, marking each detail. Footprints, the broken lock, the small indentation near the cabin door where someone had leaned. And then she found it, a carved symbol, partially hidden under fallen leaves, the same symbol she had noticed in the police reports. A signature, perhaps, left by Derek as a mark of his presence. Emma felt a mix of fear and vindication. He had been sloppy or arrogant enough to leave a trace, but meticulous enough to evade capture until now. Back in her apartment, she laid out all her findings. Maps, photographs, notes, and journal entries formed a chaotic web of clues. Slowly, a picture emerged. Derek had been obsessed with controlling Leela, eliminating anyone he saw as a threat, including Emma. His attack on Leela was deliberate, and his warning to Emma was not just a threat, it was a promise. As she worked late into the night, a noise made her freeze. A soft knock at the door, almost tentative, almost polite. Her heart slammed in her chest. She tiptoed to the peephole and glimpsed a dark figure, too tall to be a friend or neighbor. Panic surged, but she forced herself to breathe, to think. She had learned enough to anticipate danger. Using the police as backup, she staged a scenario, leaving the door slightly ajar, appearing distracted, vulnerable. Her goal was to lure him in, to observe without confrontation. Minutes passed, the figure lingered, a shadow stretching across the hallway. Then the doorknob rattled. Slowly, deliberately, he pushed the door open. Derek Mallory. Emma's pulse raced, but she forced herself to stay calm. She had studied his behaviors, his obsession patterns. She knew he thrived on fear, but she could use it against him. "Emma," he said, his voice a mix of mockery and menace, "I've been waiting for this moment. Leela, she was perfect, wasn't she? But she didn't belong to me, and now you think you can escape." Emma didn't respond immediately. Her mind raced, thinking of the police waiting nearby, the camera she had set up, the trap she had prepared. "Why Leela? Why her?" she asked quietly. "Why not? She had everything I wanted, attention, admiration, loyalty. And you were always in the way. I couldn't let anyone take her from me again." Emma's hands clenched. She had anticipated this, memorized every reaction, every tactic he might use to intimidate her. She held her ground, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing fear overwhelm her. The confrontation escalated quickly. Derek lunged, reckless in his obsession, but Emma was ready. Using a maneuver she had practiced in self-defense classes, she dodged, guiding him toward the camera and the open window of opportunity for the police to intervene. The moment was tense, cinematic, the room charged with desperation, fear, and raw adrenaline. Just as Derek made a final, violent move toward her, the police swarmed in. He struggled, but they restrained him, handcuffs locking into place. His eyes, wild and furious, met Emma's. "This isn't over," he hissed, a final promise of menace. Emma slumped, trembling, tears of relief mixing with grief. Leela was gone, but Derek would no longer be able to hurt anyone else. The tension that had gripped her for weeks began to lift, though the trauma lingered, a scar etched deep within. As the police led Derek away, Emma allowed herself a moment of reflection. She had faced terror head-on, navigated the labyrinth of fear and obsession, and survived, not just physically, but mentally. She had pieced together the puzzle, uncovered the truth, and confronted the darkness that had haunted her life. But deep down, she knew the journey wasn't over. The shadows of the past, the memory of Leela, and the lingering threat of obsession would stay with her. Survival had brought strength, but also vigilance. Emma understood now that courage wasn't the absence of fear, it was moving forward despite it. Emma's apartment felt smaller than ever, the walls closing in as memories of Leela's laughter and the terror of that night pressed on her mind. Even with Derek in custody, her fear had not fully dissipated. The police had taken him, questioned him, and filed the necessary charges, but Emma knew in her gut that one slip, one mistake could undo months of careful planning. Detective Reynolds had assured her it was over, but he also agreed to let Emma be involved in the final stage of the investigation, reconstructing the timeline, revisiting key locations, and reviewing Derek's communications. She welcomed it. Action was the only antidote to the paralysis of fear. It was a crisp morning when they decided to recreate the cabin night scenario. Emma followed Reynolds and a small tactical team through the forest, her boots crunching against dried leaves. The air was sharp, the scent of pine mingling with damp earth. The cabin looked quiet, almost innocent in the daylight, but Emma's memory refused to soften it. Every corner, every shadow seemed alive. "Stay alert," Reynolds whispered. "He's unpredictable. We're only doing this for training, but you know him better than anyone." Emma nodded, clutching her notebook with the evidence she had meticulously compiled. She walked through the layout step by step, reliving every movement, every sound, every cry for help. It was exhausting, but necessary. Each memory gave her insight, allowed her to anticipate the attacker's patterns, his methods. That evening, the police arranged a controlled confrontation. Derek had been interrogated extensively, but he remained unrepentant, fixated on Emma even from a holding room. Surveillance cameras were installed, backup officers hidden nearby. Emma knew the plan. She would act as bait, carefully orchestrated to lure Derek into revealing the full extent of his obsession, giving the authorities enough evidence to secure his conviction. As she entered the staged apartment, her heart pounded like a drum. The lights were dim, shadows stretching across the floor. Everything was familiar, yet distorted, charged with memory and anticipation. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. The door opened, and Derek stepped inside. His presence was immediate, oppressive. The arrogance in his posture, the calculated way he surveyed the room, it was all the confirmation Emma needed. He hadn't learned, hadn't changed. He still believed he could control the situation. "Emma," he hissed, voice low and venomous, "you shouldn't be here. You don't understand. None of this would have happened if you hadn't interfered." Emma didn't flinch. She let him advance slightly, her eyes steady. She had memorized his behaviors, his obsession-driven reactions. She needed to remain calm, project vulnerability, but not fear. "Why Leela?" she asked, her voice soft but unwavering. "Why did you do this? What did she ever do to you?" Derek's lips curled into a twisted grin. "She had everything I wanted, everything I couldn't have. She belonged to me in a way she didn't know. And you were always in the way. I couldn't let her go. And now," his eyes flashed dangerously, "now I'm finishing what I started." Emma felt a flicker of fear, natural and sharp, but she channeled it into focus. Every movement, every word was part of a strategy. The police were ready. She just needed to keep him engaged until they made their move. The psychological tension mounted. Derek lunged suddenly, reckless in his obsession. Emma sidestepped, narrowly avoiding his grasp, guiding him toward a predetermined path where cameras captured his aggression and officers were ready to intervene. His rage escalated, every word and movement recorded, every threat documented. "You think you've won?" he spat, voice cracking with fury. "You can't stop me. I'll always find you." Emma's heart raced, but her voice was steady. "You've already lost. Leela's gone. This ends tonight." In a swift, controlled maneuver, the officers restrained Derek, handcuffs clicking tightly around his wrists. His eyes, wide and filled with fury, met Emma's. "This isn't over," he screamed, but the authority of the team, combined with Emma's calm courage, silenced him. For the first time in months, Emma felt the weight of fear begin to lift. She sank into a chair, trembling, tears slipping down her cheeks. The adrenaline of the confrontation slowly ebbed, replaced by a profound exhaustion, physical, emotional, and mental. She had faced the source of her terror and survived. Later in the police station, Detective Reynolds reviewed the evidence one final time. With Emma's detailed notes, photographs, and the recordings from the controlled confrontation, they now had a solid case. Derek Mallory would face justice for both Leela's murder and the relentless threat he posed to Emma. Back at her apartment that night, Emma allowed herself a quiet moment. She sat by the window, the city lights twinkling below, a stark contrast to the shadows that had haunted her for so long. Her phone buzzed, another routine message from Reynolds confirming the charges had been filed. She didn't respond immediately, savoring the silence. Eventually, she pulled out Leela's bracelet from its box, running her fingers over the worn charm. A memory surfaced, Leela's laughter, bright and fearless, the way she had teased Emma relentlessly, the warmth of her friendship. Emma smiled through the tears. Leela was gone, but her presence lingered in every memory, every lesson, every moment of courage Emma had summoned in the past months. The journey had changed her. Fear had been a constant companion, but courage had been stronger. Emma realized that survival wasn't just about escaping death. It was about reclaiming life, about taking control of one's own story, and about honoring those lost by living fully. In the days that followed, Emma visited Leela's grave. She knelt, placing fresh flowers and the bracelet carefully on the headstone. "I survived, Leela," she whispered, voice steady. "I'll live, I'll remember, and I'll make sure no one forgets you. This is for you." As she stood and turned away, sunlight broke through the clouds, illuminating the small cemetery with a warm glow. The shadows still lingered, a reminder of the darkness that had touched her life, but for the first time they seemed distant, powerless against the light. Emma knew that healing wouldn't be instant. Survivor's guilt, memories, and grief would remain, perhaps forever. But she also knew this: she had faced evil, confronted obsession, and emerged stronger. Courage, resilience, and the bond of memory had carried her through. She would never forget Leela, and she would never forget the strength she had found within herself. And somewhere deep inside, Emma allowed herself to hope, not for the past, which was gone, but for a future where she could live freely, without fear, carrying both grief and courage in equal measure.